Welcome to the lesson on the Seventh Commandment. We're now halfway through the second table of God's law. With every commandment, it becomes ever clearer how much God wants to protect us and to protect other people from us. The seventh commandment is, "You shall not steal." With it, God protects his gift of possessions. Some people think possessions and wealth are bad things. Maybe you've heard of monks and priests in the Roman Catholic Church who take vows of poverty because they think that not having stuff is a better way of serving God. But possessions aren't evil. They are one way God blesses us. That's the reason he says, "You shall not steal." To keep us from stealing possessions that he has given to other people, and to keep other people from stealing possessions that he has given to us. Things like food and clothing and shelter and money. This safe illustration works especially well for the seventh commandment because people use safes to keep other people from stealing their stuff. If someone doesn't think that stealing is much of a problem today, it's only because we've grown so accustomed to all the measures we take to prevent it. Locks on our front doors to keep thieves from breaking into our homes, anti-theft devices at stores to keep people from shoplifting, fences to keep people from breaking onto property, padlocks for our bikes and sheds and trailers, paper shredders to keep people from stealing our personal information. And how many times do you have to enter passwords online every day to keep people from stealing your money or your identity? Stealing is all around us. We have an entire department of our government to try to prevent white-collar stealing and fraud, a billion-dollar industry of protecting your identity from thieves, IRS audits to try to keep people from cheating on their taxes, home security systems to catch visitors to your house if they try to steal your stuff when you're not looking, anti-piracy warnings and technology to try to keep people from stealing music and movies they haven't paid for. Stealing is all around us. And thieves aren't just guys who look like this. They come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and they come up with all different ways of stealing other people's stuff. There are so many different ways to steal that we have to use different terms so that people know what kind of stealing we're talking about. Robbery is taking someone else's possessions by force. That would be like this woman getting mugged on the street. The thief forces her to give him her stuff. Thievery or theft is secretly taking someone's stuff. That would be like this guy who sneaks in at night under the cover of darkness, or the shoplifter who sticks merchandise into her purse while no one is looking. Fraud is using trickery to take someone's stuff. That would be like someone getting you to make an agreement that might even technically be legal, but he uses it dishonestly to take your stuff. The seventh commandment covers all forms of stealing. It makes no difference how a person steals. If you're taking something that doesn't rightfully belong to you, you're stealing. Instead of trying to steal what belongs to your neighbor, do everything you can do to help him improve and protect his property and means of income. Let's get to the heart of the seventh commandment and talk for a moment about why people steal. I suppose we could identify all sorts of reasons. Maybe they don't have anything for themselves and they feel the only way they can provide for themselves is by stealing. Or maybe they have enough to live on but they just want more and stealing is an easy way to get it. Or maybe they just don't want to work. Or maybe they think rich people have more than they ought to have, so it's only fair if they take some of it for themselves. Or maybe they don't think that something is worth spending their hard-earned money on, but they still want to have it. Or maybe they just get a thrill out of stealing. Lots of different reasons, but I think there are at least two things every stealer has in common. Number one, they think they have a good reason for stealing. They found a way to make it right in their own eyes. And number two, possessions, money, stuff, is one of the most important things in the world to them. Like we said earlier in the video, possessions aren't evil, but people are evil when they make possessions more important than God and their neighbor. That's the first step towards stealing, making possessions more important than God and your neighbor. If what you have is more important to me than you are, then why wouldn't I want to steal your stuff? And that's why, as usual, the explanation hits the nail on the head when it says obedience to the seventh commandment begins with fear and love for God. There's a passage in 1 Timothy that warns about loving money. It says people who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. Money isn't the problem. It's the love of it that makes people wander from God and ruin their lives. It's foolish thinking, but it's all too common to think that the goal of life is money and stuff. People feel a hole in their heart that they try to fill with possessions, but it's a bottomless hole that possessions will never fill. Then they sacrifice so much in the name of more stuff and better stuff, only to wander away from God and make themselves miserable in the process. All of it stems from loving stuff more than God. And if you love stuff more than God, you will also love stuff more than you love your neighbor. Jesus once said to a man who loved his money, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." He says, watch out, be on your guard, because everyone is susceptible to greed. Greed is the sin of thinking that life consists in how much stuff you have. It's not only a sin, it's also a recipe for misery, because it can never be satisfied. It always wants more. It's always discontent. What's the antidote for greed? How do we get rid of it? Well, what's the opposite of greed? The opposite of greed is contentment, and the key to contentment is trust. True obedience to the Seventh Commandment begins with trust in God. Like the explanation says, we should fear and love God. That's where obedience to the Seventh Commandment begins. Trust. In the Bible, God doesn't stop at telling us not to steal or be greedy or discontent. He also tells us why we don't have to. It's because He's taking care of us. It's interesting that right after that last passage in Luke where He says, "Watch out, a man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions," He immediately goes on to say, "Don't worry. Do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. Life is more than food, and the body more than clothes. Consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable you are than birds." By comparing us to birds who don't have barns, Jesus isn't telling us not to work. Our hard work is one of the chief ways in which He provides for us. He's not saying don't work. His point is, don't worry. Look at the birds. Birds are God's pets, and He takes care of them. You're His child. He's also going to take care of you. A person can waste so much of their life in worry. Am I going to have enough? Am I going to be all right? Are my kids going to be taken care of? Don't worry, God says. Remember who you are. You're my child. Go and work hard, and then lay your head on your pillow at night in peace, because I promise I'm going to take care of you. So why do I need to worry? Why do I need to steal? Why do I need to be discontent? My God will always give me everything that I need. In that same passage, Jesus goes on to teach what freedom from worry frees us to do. Unbelievers waste their lives trying to find satisfaction and peace in possessions. Jesus says, your Father knows what you need when it comes to possessions, so you don't have to worry about that. Instead, seek first God's kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. God's kingdom refers to the eternal blessings God gives through Jesus, His forgiveness, His love, His life. When people chase after possessions, they leave those eternal blessings behind. When Christians have God's forgiveness and love and life through faith in Jesus, only then can they see the proper role of possessions in their life. Possessions are not gods for us to serve as slaves. Possessions are tools with which we can serve God and others. For example, Christian parents work hard and use their money to provide their family with food and clothing and shelter, to help the poor, to support the work of the church, so that they may grow stronger in faith in Jesus and others can hear about Jesus too. When we use the possessions that God entrusts to our care as tools to serve others, Jesus says we're also serving God and we're showing God's love to others. And He will always make sure that we have enough, And now and then He'll give us opportunities to trust His promise that it will always be enough. And finally, when we die and we leave our possessions behind, we'll still have Him. We'll still have the eternal blessings He has given to us through Jesus. So the seventh commandment protects God's gift of possessions. It's to protect the possessions that God has given to us and to others, to keep us from stealing from each other. And it's also to protect us from misusing our possessions, from putting our trust in them, from trying to find our life in them, from making them into our God. Instead, God wants us to put our trust in Him for everything that we need for earth and for everything that we need for eternity. And He promises to give it.